What is up, everybody? It is your local Ottawa fan, and I'm finally here to talk about the 4Nations Cup, where Canada, wrong way, Canada once again proves why it is our sport. They win the 4Nations Cup, and first, I just want to say what a great tournament this was. This was a slam dunk. This was a breakaway with an empty net for the NHL, and thankfully, we weren't Patrick Stefan. Great tournament. Even people who were like, oh, I don't know, you had to get hooked. And this is why I love best on best international hockey. And this is also why I think that, you can't do it all the time. I know we got the Olympics next year, and then 2 years after that, the World Cup. I don't want it to be oversaturated because technically, we got the IHF World Tournament, not the World Juniors, just the regular one, and it's not best on best. Now, obviously, it's happening in the middle of the playoffs, which is a big reason why some players aren't going to go, but it's not the same. It doesn't have that same allure because it's not the best on best, but this was the best players in the world playing their hearts out. This wasn't like the All-Star game where clearly nobody really cared. I mean, sure, if it's tied late, you might try a fancy move to win, but I'll put it this way. If you lose in the All-Star game, you aren't going to look like what the Americans look like after that overtime winner. You saw that. After McDavid, I mean, who leaves Connor McDavid alone in the slot? What kind of captain would leave Connor McDavid alone in the slot? Oh, I'd hate to cheer for whatever team that player plays for. That would stink. It would only stink worse if, your provincial rival was responsible for the 2 goals that you scored in the finals. As a Sens fan, that was perfect. Brady scores in the finals. Sandy scores in the finals. Canada wins 3-2 in overtime. Perfect. I will say Matthews didn't have a terrible game, but I'll tell you this: Brady didn't leave McDavid open. That wasn't his job. But it was a great game. It was a great tournament. Connor McDavid wins it. And for a lot of these players, for some of them, it's their first time playing for their country. For some of them, they haven't played in a long time. It might be their last ride or their last hurrah. It might be their last real shot at winning. Let's be honest. If Canada doesn't make it back to the gold medal game, this is probably Crosby's last run. And if Canada does make it back to the gold medal game, then there's going to be a bunch of players, either Swedish, Finnish, American, Czech, who will have seen their career come and go without ever winning international best on best. And that's what I've been saying. It's best on best. And if you oversaturate it, then eventually they're going to care less. You're going to have McDavid, who's won the tournament 5 times. Does it really need a 6th? But when it happens, now I think 9 years is way too long of a break. And I think that's part of what led to such intensity. They have waited for their whole lives, their whole careers for this moment, and it's finally here. Of course it's going to be big and bombastic, and they're going to be playing like they've never played before. They're playing for their country. That's what you dream of growing up, especially you don't know what NHL team is going to draft you. When I was younger, obviously I had dreams of making the NHL, and a knee injury prevented me from making it. I got the knee injury 2 years from now, so that's why I never made it. But in all seriousness, obviously I dreamed of scoring Game 7, quintuple overtime for the Sens to win in the final. But you don't know that that's the team that would draft you. And there's a lot of kids like me who had their favorite team growing up, and then draft day came and their favorite team didn't pick them. Maybe their least favorite team picked them. Maybe the Leafs would have drafted me if I was a super, super great player. I'm sure it's bound to happen. You're a great player. You're the clear number 1 top prospect, and your least favorite team is going to get the first overall draft pick. You have no control over that. You don't know. Growing up, you have your favorite team that you dream of playing for. You have no control. But when you're dreaming of gold medal game, overtime, you know what country you will play for. And you have a say. You have a say. If you have dual citizenship, if you were, born in America, grew up in Canada, and the Americans come calling, you can say no. You can say this isn't the country that I'd play for. But you know growing up as a kid, every Canadian kid who had dreams of making it to the bigs, whether they were like me who had their dreams when they were 7 and then realized by the time they were 8, maybe I won't make the NHL, or you're somebody right now who's still playing and still has that dream and still thinking, maybe I'll make the NHL, and you might. Look, if you're a kid watching this and you're putting in the hours and you're dedicating yourself to this sport, you might make it. Don't give up on that dream. Like, the sport's amazing and it's so fun. Don't give up. Because if you do make it, I can't tell you what team you'll play for in the NHL. I can't tell you which players from that team are going to be the ones that you'll end up looking up to. There's a lot of players, I'm sure, on the Sens who, they knew Alfredsson, but now there's a much bigger sense of pride of, Daniel Alfredsson. But growing up, they didn't watch the Sens, so they didn't have that same level of awe. You don't know who that player is. There's every player or every team in this league has that player who, kids growing up will end up playing for that team and be like, oh yeah, like Connor Bedard or Tim Stutzla or Brady Tkachuk, or, maybe it'll be like, there's so many good players who, I don't know every single player in Minnesota because I'm an Ottawa fan. We don't cross paths a lot. You might end up getting drafted by Minnesota. But I can tell you this. If you're growing up dreaming of playing hockey on the world's biggest stage, you know what country you will rep. You know what threads you will rep. So for every single player who was playing in the 4Nations tournament, this is what they dreamed of as a kid. Because every kid dreams of winning the Stanley Cup, but most kids dream of winning the Stanley Cup in a certain jersey. And that's very hard to do, to win the cup with the hometown team you cheered for growing up. Because you might not ever go to your hometown team. It's as simple as that. It just might not happen. But every kid also grows up dreaming of playing for their country. And there's no trades in international. But if you oversaturate it, and this tournament becomes what we do every year instead of the All-Star Game, eventually it'll be like the All-Star Game, and it will just kind of be something that you did. Like, the same way that the first time you make it to the All-Star Game, it's a huge honor. You can see, watch people who've made the All-Star Game, watch players who made the All-Star Game for the first time. You can kind of see there's a lot, especially if they're young, there's a lot more of that, like, I made it. I'm an NHL All-Star. Like, it's your dream come true. You're standing there with these icons, these great players, and you're amongst them. You're amongst the all-stars of the league. And then watch the guy who was at his 10th All-Star game, and, like, he just is having fun with it, but, it's just fun. It's for the kids. That wasn't this tournament. And every game, except maybe the US-Finland game, was great. Canada-Sweden. OT thriller, great game. US-Finland so-so. Canada-US, and then Finland-Sweden, another OT thriller. Both great games. Then we had Canada-Finland, which looked like it was going to be a complete, dismantling, only for to turn around right at the end and become this game where I was clenching everything. My teeth, my fists, everything. And thankfully, Canada comes out on top and makes the finals. The U.S. losing to Sweden, and by that point, Sweden had been eliminated. But you could tell they were playing for pride, for national pride. They weren't just playing because, whatever, we don't care. They cared. Go back, watch that game. Watch the Swedish players. They weren't playing defeated. They were playing saying, you know what, we are not going to leave this tournament winless. We're going to win a game for our country. Even if we don't get to the finals. That's what you love to see. And then the finals. Canada-US. Canada goes up 1-0. Brady Tkachuk scores one. Then another Jake Sanderson goal to give the US the 2-1 lead. Sam Bennett ties it, and who else but Connor McDavid to win the game 3-2 in overtime, reminiscent of Sidney Crosby in 2010, reminiscent of Paul Henderson in 1972, and with the political landscape, the same kind of impact that both of those games had. I'm going to be honest, going into this tournament, I was ready for Canada to be the bad guys. The team that's run this sport, that's won the past 3 best-on-best tournaments, and the United States was playing for Johnny Hockey. Honestly, the U.S. should have been the good guys. Everyone in the world should have been rooting for us to lose. And, well, I don't want to get too much into politics, but an orange man down south said some very disparaging things about our country, about our sovereignty, attacked our sovereignty, and all of a sudden, people cared a whole lot less about the United States story because they were now playing, and especially because they embraced playing for a guy who was attacking our sovereignty. So to go into Boston in the U.S. and beat them on their home ice. Again, in 2002, we beat them on their home ice. In 2010, they got a chance for revenge on our home ice, and we beat them again. They should have had, like, everything was pointing going into this tournament for the U.S. to be the good guys, to be the team that finally gets one over their big brother. No. Nuh-uh. We run this sport. It's our country. It's our trophy. It's our sport. Never forget it. It's our country. It's our sport. And you will never have that. Ever. And Canada wins. But I'm not going to sit here and act like the other games weren't great. Again, Finland and Sweden, it's an underrated classic. And honestly, in the Olympics next year, if Canada can't win gold, I want Finland-Sweden finals. If it can't be Canada, you don't get how great those games are, how great this tournament was. And I say, don't oversaturate it. If you do this all the time every year, eventually it's going to lose its luster. But the entire world was watching. Nobody cares about the NBA All-Star Game. Nobody cares about the Pro Bowl. And nobody cares about the NHL All-Star Game. But the entire world, most of the world, I mean, definitely Finland and Sweden was watching. The U.S., record numbers. We were putting up Stanley Cup Finals numbers. For what was replaced, I got to emphasize this. This was to replace the All-Star Game. They were putting up Stanley Cup Finals numbers. But of course, it has to end with McDavid being the hero. And I just wanted to talk about how great this tournament was. I said I would, and I feel a little bad because I'm saying what everyone else has said, but I mean, how can you not? And don't oversaturate it, but the Olympics, the World Cup every 2 years, I agree with. And I think International Best on Best is back. It's back. I've missed it. And as always, go Canada, go!